Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, October 24th, 2023. Time for another 90-minute workout. Apparently, we're way behind on the number of 90-minute workouts we've been able to do and the number of newspapers we've been able to read, produce, and otherwise process. Of course, if you're like the CEO of Chevron or have read about the CEO of Chevron, a viral item yesterday that I guess got published in Financial Times the other day. In case you were wondering, if you saw our reference to it without links in the morning post today, or perhaps have just seen me tweeting about it, or others, any of the other millions of people who were astonished to find out that the Chevron CEO claims to wake up in the morning at 3:45 a.m. in order to fit in a 90-minute workout and then have breakfast, just coffee, of course, and read, half a dozen newspapers by 6 a.m. when it's time to head for the office. And then he stays at the office from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., but then goes home to a quiet domestic life because he's just a regular sort of guy, etc., etc. So, and he allows himself a generous, I think, 5 hours sleep before waking up again to work out for 90 minutes again, which I do 6 or 7 times a day before he even gets up, quite honestly. It just reminds me of that old Monty Python sketch about the guys bragging about that or ends up getting to be, we walked uphill both ways to school. We lived in a dirt floor shack. You're lucky you had a shack. You're lucky you had a floor, the whole thing, right? We lived in a lake, right? Anyway, and then the one that, inspired me yesterday about the guys who we would wake up at 2 a.m, half an hour before we went to bed, etc., etc. And, I guess it's just one of the habits of highly successful people. It did generate some very interesting commentary along the way of people saying, notice that there's no mention in here of any of the other petty things that the rest of us have to spend time on. Of course, he had claimed to be waking up at 3:45 a.m. and then jump out of bed to go to the gym. And of course, go to the gym might mean a different thing for him than it means for you, because he was going for a 90-minute workout, and then at 5:15 he was having coffee and reading his half dozen newspapers. 3:45 to 5:15, of course, is exactly 90 minutes, which means there's no time to change clothes into your workout gear. Certainly no time spent getting in the car and driving to the gym, which isn't open anyway. And surely the Chevron CEO has the gym in his own house. I'm sure he saves time that way. But yeah, not even changing into clothes, taking a shower at the speed of light, I suppose. And then, of course, reading 6 newspapers thoroughly in the 45 minutes he allots himself for the coffee and the consumption of newspapers, because he likes to be informed. I mean, that on this show it takes 45 minutes to read an article, so maybe he's a speed reader. I don't know. I don't have the highly effective habits of billionaire people, so not much I can comment on in that respect. But I just thought it was rather remarkable that the other comments about it, right? There's no mention of the things that people do for him in order to make this possible. Who's making that coffee? It can't be him. He doesn't have time to spare. Who's driving him to the office? Who's cleaning the house? Who's cooking the meals? Who's feeding him his lunch and dinner and picking up after him and putting the stuff in the dishwasher? We don't know. Division of labor has always been this way. But, okay, I just thought that was sort of interesting and thought I would share that with you. I don't know. I'll have to find. Now I got to go find the social media shares of that thing, just in case you don't believe that it's really true. I mean, I don't believe it's really true, but in case you don't believe that they published the claim that this was true. All right, let's see. Much to catch up on here today. Oh, by the way, for production staff, my alarm has told me that the anniversary is tomorrow, I guess, which is interesting. I didn't even realize I could program, since I've somewhere along the line for family members, my brother, one of many, who has an anniversary tomorrow. You know who you are. Or maybe some of the rest of you know who they are. Anyway, but I guess I got smart at some point. I used to put in their anniversaries, and then, of course, the alarm would go off, and I'd say, fat lot I can do about it now. I guess I'm going to email you happy anniversary, but no chance of sending a card. But and usually that doesn't work either, because by the time the alarm goes off, I'm committed to 90 minutes of working out and reading 11D5 newspapers. So at some point, I programmed it to tell me that the next day is the anniversary, and I think maybe that's rather haphazard. I don't think I've done that for a lot of things, but there you go. There's a habit for highly effective billionaires for you. Tell yourself things ahead of time so that you can do something about them. All right. Well, if you're not inclined to do that, you can sit back, relax, and let us tell you what's going on, or at least our best guess at what's going on. There is still no Speaker of the House. You know that to be true. You knew that yesterday, and they didn't do anything. Well, you knew that yesterday morning, and they didn't do anything that would move there any closer to that goal, really, yesterday either. They had a series of meetings like the billionaire guy did. Oh, look, I put it aside. It's in pocket, so it's going to be easy to find. Wonderful. I should have done that in between 90-minute workouts yesterday. But they had some conference, what do they call it? Yeah, conference meetings yesterday. They still have 95 people running for the seat, and several of them are, well, let's say underqualified, I would say, but it's wide open now. They're no longer really following the usual chain of command, as most of the regular chain of command has already run and been defeated anyway, so it doesn't make a great deal of difference. But the stretching this out is giving the chroniclers of our era a chance to give us, in some cases, local flavor, if necessary, to let us know who some of these unknowns really are, and to remind us, in some cases, where the people are, at least in some sense, known quantities, remind us of what their most egregious transgressions against democratic norms have been in their past, so that we can properly worry about the possibility of them becoming Speaker of the House of Representatives and second in line to the presidency here in the United States, leaders of the free world that we are. So, let's see. Yesterday there was sort of a generic roundup available to us from the New York Times. And maybe we'll run through a couple of those things on the guess that Joan McCarter, when she comes by, will be somewhat interested in discussing the topic of there being no speaker, that being on the congressional beat, although I'm sure that her interests range all over the place and may lead us elsewhere. But it's time to get some sense of who's running, who'll be dropping out, who won't be, and who's awful enough to get past, I guess, the first round, such that the bulk of the Republican conference is willing to consider them for this job. The Times approach to it, meet the Republicans running for Speaker, I guess gives us a quick overview of everybody. The lawmakers vying for the job include veterans of the House, committee chairman, a top member of Republican leadership, and a sophomore. Because why not? You should also, we have every other kind of experienced person. How about someone who's experienced at being inexperienced relative to the rest of it? Why not, right? As one of Greg's favorite, Roman Hruska, right, was the one who said, mediocre people need to be, or so, I forget what the quote was, but essentially mediocre people need to be represented in government too. And I'm here to do just that. Let's see. Katie Edmondson and Luke Broadwater are the reporters for this Times piece. This was a Sunday publication with an update yesterday. 8 Republicans are running for Speaker. I thought it was 9. Maybe the update is that one of them got stuck in a 90-minute workout loop and never came out or something like that. Or maybe one of them was Jim Jordan. I don't know. 8 Republicans are running for Speaker after the party cast aside Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio as its latest nominee for the leadership post. A flood of lawmakers began campaigning just hours after Republicans voted in a closed-door meeting to restart the nomination process after Mr. Jordan, his support ebbing, failed on a third-floor vote to win the speakership. The vote essentially ensured that the office of the Speaker would remain empty for a third week. Lawmakers vying for the job include veterans of the House, committee chairman, a top member of Republican leadership, and a sophomore. Virtually none have had the kind of commanding national profile normally required of the Speaker, who is not only second in line to the presidency, but a key fundraiser for their party's efforts to protect and expand its majority. I don't think anybody ever really regarded Kevin McCarthy as having a commanding national profile, but you get it once you move into the job. It just sort of comes with it. They will have to navigate the same treacherous dynamics of a bitterly divided conference that the three men before them could not, leaving some Republicans openly questioning whether anyone can win a majority of votes on the House floor, which is another way of, it's a political science moment here for just a second. That's another way of saying that the Republican Party isn't actually a party anymore, or at least it's not just one. It could be two or several others. But that's one of the problems with this. Our system, of course, is really built around the idea of a two-party system. We have the ability to accommodate people who aren't members of either party, though we don't really have much ability anymore to accommodate third or other actual organized parties. We have, two parties, and then we can accommodate independents who claim not to be members of either party, but who, for the purposes of, say, getting committee assignments, et cetera, will opt to caucus with one or another of the two parties. But that's sort of the way we approximate, not the parliamentary system, but, coalition government. You can elect independents if you want. You can even elect people who are members of other parties, but when they get here, they're going to be all alone. And in order to get anything done and get ahead in any way, they're going to have to decide to team up with one conference or caucus or the other. But yeah, what happens if people arrive in force and there are 10 seats? Or let's say, just hypothetically, for the sake of argument, no particular reason to land on 8. Let's say there are 8 members of the otherwise majority party that stand apart from this majority party such that some turmoil arises and a speaker is unseated, let's say. I don't know that the 8 are themselves, in this case, wink, wink, actually a coherent group, but they could be. But we have to do some thinking about how we would accommodate some of this, because I think the Republican Party may be splitting up at, over this, or at least they functionally have, certainly in terms of running the House of Representatives. They've run into a functional split here. They may still have a similar overarching ideology, but minority parties can't elect speakers in our system. You can work in a parliamentary system like in other countries where you form a coalition in order to put together enough votes to control the place. But one of the real serious issues with what purports to be the Republican Party is that it's party dogma at this point. The one thing that unites all the factions of Republicans, well, not all of them. There is a faction out there that doesn't adhere to this, but several of them still claim to adhere to the idea that they will refuse to work with members of another party. There's only one other party in this country, generally speaking, that can be contended with. But, their platform is to refuse to cooperate with Democrats, and that it is the agreement that McCarthy reluctantly came to accept Democratic votes for some of his work, some of the initiatives he was trying to shepherd through the House, that angered this small group, or at least most of the small group, and they threw him out of the seat. So it's sort of interesting that the other countries have come to this idea of, well, this is how we'll do it. We'll have multiple parties and we'll have coalition governments. And here in the United States, 2 parties, and we won't even allow coalitions between these 2 parties. It's a fairly serious problem. Okay, well, where were we? We're going to read about how many of these 8 or maybe 9 candidates are A, qualified for the job, or B, will refuse to work with any other parties in creating this coalition that they can't build. So where were we? Let's see. They described them, mostly top people, then one sophomore, and they all have to do the fundraising, right? And okay, so let's see. Some Republicans who said they were considering running for the position on Friday announced over the weekend that they would not seek the top job. I guess that's how we went from 9 to 8, including Representatives Jody C. Arrington and Roger Williams, both of Texas. The crowded field then shrank to 8 on Monday night. It was 10, then it went to 11, and then it went to 9, and then it went to 8 on Monday night as one of the lesser-known candidates in the field, Representative Dan Muser. We were all confused about who Muser was. He's from Pennsylvania, and he told colleagues he was dropping out, and they probably said, dropping out of what? A speaker's race. Oh, you were in that? Okay, great. All candidates except 2. Representatives Tom Emmer, we talked a lot about him yesterday, of Minnesota, and Austin Scott of Georgia. So all the candidates remaining except 2, 6 of the 8, voted to object to certifying President Biden's 2020 victory in at least one state. Oh, I have to pause, by the way. Our discussion yesterday of the fact that several members of Congress who were running for speaker were election deniers and said that they believed that Biden did not legitimately win the 2020 presidential election. And we said, that's so stupid. It's quite obviously factual that he did, and it's dangerous for the country to even consider for the speakership somebody who would say such a thing. That earns us yet more warnings from YouTube, which is doing their research beautifully, and their AI bots that scan the content of things to warn people away from potential disinformation are doing a bang-up job. If you tell people that the sorts of things that these Republicans believe is wrong and is disinformation, but I guess if you state it a certain way, or if you quote them, I don't know. At any rate, the AI bot says, you're the one telling people disinformation. We're going to straighten out this whole disinformation problem by telling everybody that you, who are telling people that there's disinformation out there, are the disinformation mongers, I guess. You're the ones responsible for disinformation. Everybody be careful. So this is a mild thing, but they apparently have appended to the video of yesterday's show a notation about the 2020 election, which is essentially a link to a Wikipedia article about the 2020 election and notes for people who might otherwise be confused by our disinformative show, apparently, that, in fact, Joe Biden did win the 2020 election. And they also helpfully note for me I can take one of their video courses to help expunge this record of disinformation and I guess get rid of this warning. Although, what incentive have I got to tell people don't click on this link or remove this link to Wikipedia, where an article will tell you what I told you in my podcast because it's true, and I agree with it 100%, and I wish everybody would go and read this Wikipedia article on the 2020 election. Not that anybody who's listening to the show needs to. So what's my incentive to go through their stupid training program to get rid of that notation? It's a good notation. Thank you. I'm glad you attached it. I don't know why you attached it, but thanks, I guess. I guess I should be worried that it makes me look like I'm distributing disinformation. But, the 16 of you who are watching the videos, which aren't even videos, by the way, you know what you're getting into and you're enjoying it. And, if you click on the 2020 election link at Wikipedia, good. Have a good time. Anyway, so where were we? Right. All the candidates for speaker among the Republicans, except for 2 of them, voted to object to certifying Biden's win. All candidates except for 3, another way of slicing the group, Representatives Kevin Hern of Oklahoma, Mike Johnson of Louisiana, and Gary Palmer of Alabama. They're the only ones who did what? Let's see. All candidates except for 3 voted in support of a stopgap spending bill put forward by Kevin McCarthy, the speaker at the time, to avert a shutdown. Representative Byron Donalds of Florida was absent for the vote. So that kind of stands it on its head. I think we wanted them to vote for the stopgap spending bill, and they all did, except for 3 of them, Kevin Hern, Mike Johnson, and Gary Palmer, who are in fact the bad guys in all of this. All right, fine. Here are the Republicans who are running for speaker. There's Tom Emmer, Everybody gets a picture. It's fantastic because no one knows who these people are or what they look like. Emmer, 62, is the highest-ranking Republican in the race. Endorsed by McCarthy, Emmer is the number 3 Republican in the House, whose job is to, quote, whip, get it, or count votes to pass the Speaker's agenda, except there is no Speaker or whatever. So, all right, so this is the sort of like the normal go-to guy here, right? If the number 1 guy in the Republicans is the Speaker, McCarthy, and he's thrown out, and then they try to put the number 2 guy in, Scalise, and that doesn't work. Normally, you'll then go to number 3, Emmer, but they skipped over him and went to Jordan and didn't put him in, so now they're turning around and going to number 3. Now, Emmer, considered among the front runners, though he could encounter the same issues that dogged Representative Steve Scalise of Louisiana, Republicans' first failed nominee to replace McCarthy. Far-right Republican activists have accused Mr. Emmer of being insufficiently supportive of President Donald Trump, and who's not the president. And some moderates in the conference were privately unhappy that he did not back an effort to temporarily empower the acting Speaker, Patrick McHenry of North Carolina. Although I think that should be understandable. He wanted to be the regular Speaker. Why extend the nightmare of keeping Patrick McHenry and his stupid bow tie in the office? He is a former college ice hockey player and coach. And anytime you're a former college coach among the Republican ranks, you should probably do some investigating. Never know what he was doing extracurricular-wise. Mr. Emmer has allies among both the conservative and the establishment wings of the party. Mr. Emmer served 2 terms as chairman of the National Republican Congressional Committee, helping Republican candidates across the country win elections, which is a bad idea, and making inroads across the conference in the process. That would make him a big fundraiser and probably the most capable of stepping into that role, where Kevin McCarthy has left it behind. Then there's Austin Scott of Georgia. He was the accidental candidate a little while ago. Now he's doing it on purpose. He's 53. A surprise candidate for the Speaker nomination last week, garnering 81 votes in the conference against the better-known Mr. Jordan, a small business owner. Sure. Mr. Scott was the freshman class president for the 112th Congress. He is also an ally of Mr. McCarthy and expressed outrage at the Californians' ouster at the hands of far-right rebels, denouncing them as nothing more than grifters. Next up, Byron Donalds of Florida, and he's been getting speaker votes, random speaker votes for some time now. And it's not really clear why, but I guess somebody thought it was a good idea last time around. Mr. Donalds, 44, a member of the ultra-conservative House Freedom Caucus, is a favorite of the party's right wing. This is only his second term in Congress. He won his Naples-based district in 2020. A native New Yorker, as many Floridians are, he received as many as 20 votes for Speaker on the House floor in January, during the prolonged fight that resulted in Mr. McCarthy emerging as Speaker. Now, again, he's a sophomore, and he was getting these votes when they were voting for McCarthy, which means on the first day of his second term, people were voting for him for Speaker. That's pretty remarkable. Not sure what drove it. My guess, honestly, is that I don't know who did the voting for him, but I would guess that there was probably a little bit. I mean, I'm sure they clearly admired him and liked him for whatever reason. But I do wonder whether they thought, I just don't have a candidate in this. I know I'm not really for McCarthy. I'm not really sure who I am for. But if I maybe vote for a black Republican, I'll look like I'm very inclusive. I don't know. But, there aren't that many to choose from, for one thing. But, I don't know. He certainly seems to have developed in a close-knit circle of friends in the year or so, or the 2 years or so that he's been in Congress. So, I guess if he's not going to win, they might actually not be unhappy to see him win. But if he's not going to win, it doesn't hurt you to flatter your friend by voting for them for Speaker. Kevin Hearn of Oklahoma is next. There's some leathery dudes up for this, by the way. Emmer and Hearn are both weather-beaten, but okay. They are in their 60s, and the other guys are a little bit younger. Hearn is 61, chairman of the Republican Study Committee, a group committed to advancing conservative ideology that a majority of the Republican conference belongs to. The post often serves as a springboard to leadership positions. Mr. Jordan and Mr. Scalise, as well as former Vice President Mike Pence, have all led the committee. Hearn has the conservative credentials that could assuage the hard-right lawmakers who bedeviled Mr. McCarthy, but he is seen as a more moderate option than Jordan, which means that the person who called up the congressman's wife and threatened her with sexual molestation and other physical assaults won't be happy. Because remember, his demand was Jordan or more conservative, or else you're going to get molested. So, not Hearn, I guess. Won't help, at least if this guy reads the New York Times. Nicknamed Mick Congressman, like McDonald's. It's because of his previous ownerships of 18 McDonald's franchises. Mr. Hearn, a former aerospace engineer, was elected to the House in 2018. So that's quite a career. I'm an aerospace engineer, McDonald's franchisee, and member of Congress. That's a lot of things. Next up is Gary Palmer of Alabama. I guess the only photo they had readily available for him is him hunched over in a darkened stairwell somewhere and speaking on his cell phone. And I'll read you a little bit about him as we get ready for our first break. A former walk-on wide receiver for the University of Alabama. A lot of sports involvement in the speakership, right? They didn't elect the wrestling coach. Well, they did elect the wrestling coach the first time, back when it was Denny Hastert, and he turned out to be a child molester. And then they nominated another one, and they got the hockey player and football player. And all right, walk-on wide receiver for Alabama, Mr. Palmer, 69, looks a lot better than the other 60-year-olds, is the longtime chairman of the Republican Policy Committee. They got a lot of committees, making him the number 5 Republican in the House, and I guess looking to jump ahead in line. We'll read a little bit more about him after this. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue with our recitation of the, brief biographies, I guess, of the 957 members of the House Republican Conference who are running for Speaker. We had just gotten into the brief bio of Gary Palmer of Alabama, who was a former walk-on wide receiver for the University of Alabama, like Forrest Gump, essentially, and the Republican Policy Committee chair, which position makes him the number 5 Republican in the House. Let's see, Emmer is number 3. I think at least Stefanik occupies the 4th ranking position, and she's not running because she has the job of trying to decide who to suck up to. Remember, which one of you guys will I say is a natural-born speaker and the person who's had my loyalty from day one? So skipping her and going to number 5, that's, I guess, also very interesting and typical for the Republican Party. Are there women in this list? Probably not, because you know how they are about leadership in the Republican Party. They've got someone in leadership at the number 4 slot, and so the number 1 guy gets kicked out, so they tried the number 2 person, the number 3 person, the number 5 person, the number nothing person. Everybody gets to go before the first woman in leadership. All right. Well, anyway, who are we talking about again? Gary Palmer, Alabama. He's a member of the Freedom Caucus. Palmer keeps a lower profile than many of his deeply conservative counterparts. As a former member of McCarthy's leadership team, who then backed Jordan's candidacy for Speaker, Palmer could try to present himself as a unifying force between the party's factions. He was elected to Congress in 2014. He's, as an opportunist, I could unify all of us. I mean, I was on the McCarthy team when I thought that would help me. Then McCarthy got thrown out, and I joined Jordan's team, the team of the people who threw out McCarthy. But I'm hoping to unify you with that. Well, I don't think so. Jack Bergman of Michigan, also a little older than most. A few people outside of his district may be familiar with Mr. Bergman, a retired Marine Corps Lieutenant General. Mr. Bergman, 76, represents Michigan's Upper Peninsula and the northern half of the Lower Peninsula. So he's got all their peninsulas covered. That's good news. A highly decorated naval aviator, Mr. Bergman has earned cachet with many of the mainstream conservatives, several of whom are military veterans themselves, who opposed Mr. Jordan's candidacy and wanted an experienced leader at the helm. Well, a lieutenant general will help, that's for sure. Mr. Bergman has presented himself as a temporary option who would work to steady the ship and return normalcy to the House. That would be wise. Sounds the best of them so far, quite honestly. What we need right now is a speaker who has experience leading and can put ego aside to work together for the American people. Well, work together with other people, not just you. But okay. Mr. Bergman said in a statement, we need a leader who shuns permanent power and recognizes the current crisis of leadership. And I guess at 76, you could expect that he'd be back out the door in relatively short order. Not somebody who, I guess, plans to spend a decade in the speakership. I don't know. Mike Johnson of Louisiana is pictured next. I assume he's the guy in the center of this picture. I don't recognize everybody else in it. Is that Chip Roy with the, I don't know. With the goatee next to him. I mean, I don't know. A lot of people look like that. But anyway, Mike Johnson of Louisiana, 51, a lawyer, the former chairman of the Conservative Republican Study Committee, mentioned earlier. I forget who's the guy from the study committee now. An evangelical Christian. What? No way. Who was a member of the Judiciary Committee. Mr. Johnson was a key architect of the Republicans' objections to certifying the victory of Joe Biden on January 6th, so he's an insurrectionist too. Many Republicans in Congress relied on his arguments, which were terrible, and they lost. He is an ally and supporter of Mr. Jordan, the other insurrectionist, who only considered moving forward with his own bid for Speaker after Mr. Jordan fell short. So, there's that. And let's see, by the way, breaking news being brought to us by Justice, who in more ways than one. MSNBC confirms, he says, that Jenna Ellis has pleaded guilty in Georgia. So she actually went ahead and pled guilty. I don't think I even knew that was pending. So that's 4 of the 18 co-conspirators in the Fulton County cases who have flipped and pled guilty. And I had a feeling Jenna Ellis eventually... I have a feeling a lot of them will, but it looked like Jenna Ellis was sort of been distancing herself for some time now. So, okay, she's gone ahead and do that. All right, we'll see if we can grab an article about that at some point during the day. Let's see. Next up is Pete Sessions of Texas. I called him out yesterday as a yard sign stealer, but he's got... an interesting background, certainly, terrible background that you may have heard his name in the past. Anyway, let's see how they treat his bio here. Mr. Sessions, 68, is the longest-serving member of Congress so far who is considering running for Speaker, first serving from 1997 to 2019. But remember, he had his career interrupted. After he was defeated in 2018 by a Democrat, Mr. Sessions ran for a seat in a different district and prevailed, returning to Congress in 2021. He has previously served as the chairman of the House Republican Campaign Committee and as chairman of the Powerful Rules Committee. Mr. Sessions participated in a 2019 campaign by Trump allies targeting Marie Yovanovitch, the ambassador to Ukraine, writing to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo that she should be fired for repeatedly expressing disdain for the Trump administration. Trump recalled her, you may recall yourself, in April of that year. So, in addition to being a bit of an insurrectionist, he's a Ukraine co-conspirator as well. So I guess you're supposed to watch out for people like that, but maybe instead you want to nominate them for speakership. I don't know. Anyway, so I mentioned that there's some other information about some of these people out there. I will take you back just for a second to what's the date on this article? 2004, August 19th, 2004. Something Coase wrote back at that point from the reporting from the field, essentially here. I don't think he was there on the ground or anything, but the Texas's 32nd congressional district, that's where Sessions was at the time. Texas 32, when lawn signs attack. How do you like that? The Martin Frost campaign, remember Democrat Martin Frost of Texas, is keeping up the pressure on Pete Sessions on the lawn sign controversy first discussed here. Both Frost and Sessions have been redistricted into one district as part of DeLay's, remember Tom DeLay? DeLay's mad power grab, and the race will easily be the most expensive, nastiest House race this cycle. To summarize, Frost accused Sessions of stealing his lawn signs. Okay, Sessions said that he would never, ever do such a thing, and how dare Frost level such scurrilous accusations. So, Frost dropped the hammer. A Dallas police report showing that his last time around, Sessions stole his opponent's lawn signs. You can see the police report for yourself. It's linked inside of this 2004 article. Sessions has been reeling ever since. The Frost campaign presses its advantage. Late yesterday, okay, there's more, I guess, about this, but is it more about the signs? Yeah. Pete Sessions gave an interview on KLIF where he couldn't quite get his story straight on his nighttime sign misadventures. In the past few days, Sessions has changed his story on signs at least 3 times. First, the Sessions campaign said they would never steal signs. Then, a Dallas police report proves that Sessions himself was caught pulling up election signs. Then, the Sessions campaign tried to cover their tracks by saying the signs were unlawfully placed on public property, and that's why he was pulling them up. Now, according to Sessions' interview yesterday, and this is back in 2004, he wasn't pulling up Pauline Dixon's signs because they were illegally placed on a public right-of-way, as he said in Dallas Morning News, but because they were blocking his very own signs on private property. So, properly asked at the time, which is it, Pete? Were the signs on public property, meaning Sessions had also unlawfully placed those signs of his own, or were they on private property where Sessions did not have the right to remove signs? Why have Sessions and his campaign manager given so many different answers to the same question? It's time to come clean. Not that it did any good. I think Sessions returned to Congress in that election. Not only against Pauline Dixon, but then later against Martin Frost. But he was kicked out at some point. Here's the Dallas Morning News coverage of that event. Ousted in Dallas, but this is when he makes his comeback. Ousted in Dallas, 11-term Pete Sessions seeks comeback to Congress from Waco, his childhood home. Retiring Representative Bill Flores calls Sessions a carpetbagger, backing an untested rival in a crowded GOP primary for the 17th congressional district. It didn't work, and Sessions made his way back in the 2020 election, I guess, returning just in time, I guess, to participate in the insurrection. Not certain what his record was at that point, but okay, so he's a guy who's had some controversy in his past. They say he's the longest serving member of all of them. And they did note the brief interruption in his service, but of course they didn't tell you anything about the sign stealing. So, that's not what they're going to do in their brief summaries. You might have to go in depth with other people. Let's see. But you want to know more about Pete Sessions? How about if we turn to the Texas Tribune for that one? If you were wondering, I don't really know what his record was on Insurrection Day. Okay. But we have plenty more. Of course, one, his participation in the attempt to run the Ukraine gambit the first time should mark him as suspect. The sign stealing doesn't help anything. And now the Texas Tribune. Pete Sessions is otherwise known as Congressman 1. Why Congressman 1? Because he's listed that way in the indictment of Rudy Giuliani's associates, reports say. This according to the Texas Tribune in October 10th, 2019. So that's about this time of year. How many years ago? 4 years ago. Multiple news outlets have reported that the former House chairman, now running for Congress in another district, and he did so successfully, was involved in the effort to oust the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. So it's the same story, but a little bit more in depth. And, reminds us that, he got the designation just as individual one was Donald Trump. And now Congressman 1, Pete Sessions. Let's see if we can take a quick run through this one. Former U.S. Representative Pete Sessions, at the time, is an unnamed member of Congress mentioned in an indictment against two business associates of President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, according to NBC News. And you'll remember who they are. And we think a little bit differently of them these days than we did back then, but we don't know whether they're worthy of that, but they've done a good job spinning their involvement. The two are Soviet-born Igor Fruman and Lev Parnas. Remember them? They were arrested late Wednesday night at Dulles Airport outside of Washington, D.C., per ABC News. The Wall Street Journal reported that the two men are accused of violating campaign finance rules, including funneling Russian money into President Trump's campaign. Regarding Sessions, the indictment against the two men states that they committed to raise $20,000 or more for a then-sitting U.S. congressman, who is referred to in the court document as Congressman 1. The indictment goes on to state that the congressman had been the beneficiary of approximately $3 million in donations from a campaign committee. NBC News and other outlets identified that person as Sessions and reported that the committee was a Trump-aligned super PAC. So should he be Speaker of the House? You tell me. Federal authorities alleged around the same time Parnas sought Congressman 1's assistance in causing the U.S. government to remove or recall the American ambassador to Ukraine at the time, Marie Yovanovitch. Yovanovitch, are we pronouncing that correctly? Is it like Yovanovitch by any chance? I can't even remember. But anyway, she was a well-regarded diplomat, you remember this, who came into disfavor with the Trump administration and was removed from her post earlier that year. The Wall Street Journal reported then last week that Sessions, in his capacity as House Rules Committee chairman, advocated for the ouster of Yovanovitch. Why as Rules chairman? Because it's the Speaker's committee, I guess. Even though that was really better considered in the International Relations / Foreign Relations Committee. Depending on, I guess if it was Republican run at the time, they would call it Foreign Relations. Anyway, Sessions released a statement on Thursday afternoon at that time, stating he, quote, will vigorously defend myself against any allegations of wrongdoing. If I am Congressman 1, you are, I could not have had any knowledge of the scheme described in the indictment or have involvement in or coordination of it, he said. Why not? I don't know. 'Cause I was first approached by these individuals for a meeting about the strategic need for Ukraine to become energy independent, he added. There was no request in that meeting, and I took no action. Over time, I recall that there were a couple of additional meetings. Again, at no time did I take any official action after these meetings. Separately, after several congressional colleagues reported to me that the current U.S. ambassador to Ukraine was disparaging President Trump to others as part of those official duties, I wrote a letter to the Secretary of State to refer this matter directly. He continued, my entire motivation for sending the letter was that I believe that political appointees should not be disparaging the president, especially while serving overseas. Now, what interest would a Rules Committee chairman have in that? He could join someone else's letter, but to generate his own? Ordinarily, it wouldn't fall to them. But okay. Toward the end of Sessions' toughest and unsuccessful campaign for re-election last year, Giuliani headlined a fundraiser on his behalf. I've been friends with Rudy Giuliani for more than 30 years, Sessions said on his ties to the former New York City mayor. I do not know what his business or legal activities in Ukraine have been. Yes, you do. Sessions is now, then, running for Congress in the 17th Congressional District, which is about 90 miles from his former Dallas-based 32nd District. And it worked, and he's back, and now he thinks he wants to be Speaker. So, just thought you might want to have that information at your fingertips as we head into that discussion of the contest later on today. There's probably more. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Here's a Tom Emmer note for us that I grabbed from the Blue Sky Social account of Larry Glickman. Does everybody know Larry Glickman? If you don't, he's a historian at Cornell University. How do you like that? I mean, that's kind of what you need to know for all this. All right. So Larry Glickman wrote just the other day, now that Tom Emmer is under consideration to be Speaker of the House, I'm posting a thread that I did the other place, wink, wink, back in 2020 on the GOP's use of the socialism charge, which Emmer, as head of the NRCC, regularly invoked. So let's take a look at this thread from June 13th, 2020. Through the courtesy of the Thread Reader app. This is a very good analysis, he begins by saying, but my guess is that the GOP will continue to employ the socialism charge, as Jeb Bush's son did the other day when he said that Trump is, quote, the only thing standing between America and socialism. This includes a screen grab of a tweet from CNN, the CNN This Morning account. Recounting that President Trump used the word socialism in his attacks against Democrats 34 times in February, but never in May, according to FactBase. All right, well, let's see. John Avlon is then quoted here. Attacking Biden as a radical left-wing socialist just doesn't pass the swing district smell test. Hashtag reality check. And there's some video involved in that. Although Trump, Glickman continues, had been using the socialist charge increasingly since his 2019 State of the Union, when he said America will never be socialist. The charge was less central to his 2016 campaign than it had been to most previous GOP presidential campaigns. I explain why in the epilogue to my book, Free Enterprise and American History. Trump has never embraced a key part of free enterprise discourse, namely the association of free markets with freedom, upon which the freedom/socialism binary was built. This put Trump somewhat at odds with many GOP elected officials, like Tom Emmer, the chair of the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee, who regularly employs the socialism-freedom binary. And I guess this screen grab is supposed to illustrate that. NRCC Chairman Emmer, Republicans, we must take socialism, I guess, seriously, et cetera, and illustrated with a picture of Bernie Sanders, I think, if I'm reading it correctly. So, okay, the socialism charge has been used against even moderate Democrats, and I expect it will be employed against Biden as it was against Bill Clinton. It's a rhetorical pattern that has been central to the GOP since the New Deal, as Ian Millhiser showed, and there's a link to his article about it. The article, what's the title? A Brief 90-Year History of Republicans Calling Democrats Socialists. The reason for this, he continues, as I show in my book, is that very often the real target of socialism charge has been Rooseveltian liberalism and the New Deal order that it underwrote. Subsequent efforts to expand the welfare state, however mild or limited, got the same treatment. Take, for example, Ronnie Reagan's 1960 letter to Richard Nixon, in which he wrote of John F. Kennedy, under the tousled, boyish haircut is still old Karl Marx. There is nothing new in the idea of government being big brother to us all. How scary. And then a screen grab of the letter, which I guess is rather famous, but I think you got the gist of it. But okay, that's all we really need to read about that one. Just that Tom Emmer is an old hand at the let's label all Democrats socialist scare tactic. And I suppose to elevate him to the speakership brings its own special risks. But, no worse than McCarthy ever was, really, I guess, in that respect. Okay. Let's see. There's more here. And also, I guess we can revisit a story that we discussed for quite a while yesterday. The Anthony Pratt story. Axios had, I think, a little bit, I guess the latest on it yesterday was Axios quoting or allowing the Trump camp to deny all of the reports. Trump denies reports he shared sensitive details with Mar-a-Lago members. So there you have it. He's denied it. Whether you believe it or not, I don't see any real reason to believe the denial. But let's see. Oh, why it matters. You know how Axios does these things. Australian billionaire Pratt is one of 84 potential witnesses whom federal prosecutors have identified in Trump's classified documents trial, which is scheduled to begin in Florida in May. I mean, that's still a long way away, but, we're creeping ever closer to it. Trump denied the reports late Sunday. The New York Times previously reported that Republican presidential nomination frontrunner Trump leaked classified information about new U.S. nuclear submarines to Pratt, who's one of Australia's richest people. Trump has denied the claims. Let's see. Well, some more excerpts that tell us basically what we had learned yesterday from the long article. I see that John Bolton made an appearance on the Australian 60 Minutes program to basically say, that was very Trumpian. It's certainly entirely possible that he did do exactly as Pratt says. So, this is interesting. While not directly addressing the Australian media reports, Trump said in a statement to the New York Times earlier on Sunday that Pratt is from a friendly country in Australia. It's the only country in Australia. One of our great allies, adding, I don't know him well, but he seemed like a nice person. He built a factory in Ohio and created American jobs. Then he goes on to say, I know him. He's a nice guy. On Truth Social on late Sunday, that did not address the Australian media reports, Trump said the New York Times had not called him for comment. He described the New York Times story about this is a good quote, about a red-haired weirdo from Australia named Anthony Pratt that said he was leaked by Special Counsel Jack Smith and the DOJ as fake news. Except it was on 60 Minutes Australia, so come on. But it is interesting to call him a red-haired weirdo. I mean, he is a red-haired weirdo, that's true. But so is Trump, so at any rate, I don't know if that really adds too much to the picture, but it struck me as worthy of being set aside yesterday. So I don't know. I'll honor my commitment to it and take a look. Let's see what other things we have put aside. Oh, yes, there's more about the other weirdos running for Speaker of the House. And I guess maybe we can fit this in before the top of the hour break. This one about Ken Buck. But is he running? Or is he just an awful person? I don't remember that. Was he among the candidates? There's no compact list anymore. I have to scroll through the New York Times thing and see. But I don't think I saw Ken Buck mentioned. But, he's become something of a player, if not a kingmaker in all of this, because of the way he's been. He was weird in that I think the article mentions he was one of the 8 that voted to oust McCarthy, but then he's been against everybody else since. So let's see. Emmer, Scott, Donalds, Hearn, Palmer, Bergman, Johnson, and Sessions. That's 8. So Ken Buck isn't among them. But why I put away this Ken Buck piece, let's see. This is from the, not Substack, but Substack-like publication, publicnotice.co, the publication here of Noah Berlatsky, freelance writer in Chicago. Maybe you've run into him on social media. The House GOP's unlikely resistance fighter. Ken Buck is mostly terrible, but amid the speakership crisis, bad actors are taking bold stands. That's sort of worth, I think, taking note of. The ongoing GOP House speakership. Okay. Oh, I see now this pop-up ad tells us who we're dealing with in public notice here. I guess there's several. Is this, what's his name? I recognize his avatar, and now I can't pull his name out of my memory bucket here. But Aaron, is it Aaron? Is it Rupar? Is that, there's so many people whose faces I recognize from social media and see their work all the time, but I can't bring their name to mind. Anyway, but I guess Noah Berlatsky writing public notice, I think, is Aaron. This is Aaron, isn't it? Aaron's publication. Anyway, the ongoing GOP House speakership debacle has been a clownish, humiliating spectacle which has made basically every Republican involved look like a dunderhead unfit to look smug on Sean Hannity's show, much less govern the country. Anyway, so it's all the more surprising that one legislator who has emerged as a figure of resolve is Colorado's Ken Buck. Buck has not, up to now, been a figure of integrity, to put it mildly. He's a radical right Freedom Caucus member who was instrumental in defenestrating former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Buck was, in fact, one of the 8 Republicans who voted with oleaginous self-promoter Matt Gaetz to end McCarthy's speakership, plunging the caucus into chaos. And yet, suddenly and unexpectedly, Buck has located a spine and used it to stand up to his colleagues. In the leadership forum following McCarthy's ouster, Buck demanded that the 2 leading candidates, Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan, state clearly that Joe Biden, not Donald Trump, won the 2020 election. When neither would do so, Buck said he wouldn't vote for either of them. You have to imagine Buck asking the question during the leadership forum and every single Republican in the room doing a spit take. I can imagine that. Wiping the coffee off their chins and having flashbacks to Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. Buck's newfound concern with the election integrity doesn't make him a good person. It does indicate, though, that the House GOP leadership crisis has perhaps opened up space for some bad actors to make better choices. And it's also a reminder that if the GOP is going to get to a better place, some pretty awful people will need to decide to be less awful. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's get back to our little reading about Ken Buck, lest you think he is a worthy figure simply because he demanded that both Scalise and Jordan answer the question about whether or not Joe Biden legitimately won the 2020 presidential election and thereby exposed them as insurrectionists. So, that was worthy, but as we heard Noah say on our way out to the break, it is a reminder, this whole episode, that if the GOP is going to get to a better place, some pretty awful people will need to decide to be, either tactically or perhaps just temporarily, less awful. So the next section reminds you would never vote for Ken Buck. As you'd expect from a very conservative Republican, Buck's past, distant and more immediate, is disgraceful. In 2005, as Weld County prosecutor, he refused to prosecute a rape case despite a taped confession because he said a jury, quote, could very well conclude that this is a case of buyer's remorse. That's not going to go over good. When he ran for Colorado Senate in 2010, he claimed voters should back him in the primary because he said, unlike his female opponent, I don't wear high heels. What? Okay. Buck is an anti-abortion extremist who opposes abortions even in cases of incest or rape. In that 2010 campaign, he called homosexuality a choice and compared it to alcoholism. Okay, another great choice there, that one. After his election to the House in 2014, he embraced radical right positions, such as trying to defund Defense Department climate change initiatives on the grounds that they would undermine national security. when they were, in fact, in pursuit of national security, but also right about climate change. Anyway, he was one of only 2 representatives to vote against the bipartisan COVID aid package in March of 2020. He was one of 157 Republicans, however, to vote against bipartisan protections for same-sex marriages in 2022. And, of course, he was one of the 8 Republicans to vote to oust McCarthy to punish the Speaker for using Democratic votes to prevent the government from shutting down. So, yeah, that's helpful. Nor has Buck been a consistent defender of democracy. In the run-up to the 2020 election, he asked the Justice Department and the Federal Election Commission to investigate postcards sent by the Colorado Secretary of State informing people of how to register to vote. Oh, yeah, you can't have that happening. That definitely deserves dramatic music. To set that apart is an obviously evil act. Postcards. Buck framed this innocuous get-out-the-vote effort as a sinister plan to encourage ineligible people to vote. How so? We don't know. And like many Republicans in the Obama era, Buck was eager to stoke nonsense claims of voter fraud as a pretext for discouraging Democratic constituencies from voting. Buck also abetted Trump's big lie. He signed on to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's lawsuit, which attempted to decertify electors in 4 states that voted against Trump. He also introduced a resolution in the House in support of Trump's Stop the Steal efforts, demanding that the courts investigate and bring to justice those who perpetrate election fraud. There was, of course, no election fraud to speak of. Next up, Buck is no longer towing the MAGA line. Is that right? If you squint, though, you can also see some precedents for Buck's abrupt denunciation of Trumpist election lies. Way back in 2010, for example, during his Senate run, state Senate, he was caught on tape saying, "Will you tell those dumbasses at the Tea Party to stop asking questions about birth certificates while I'm on camera?" That's pretty good. Okay. Buck inevitably semi-apologized, but the inadvertent moment of honesty suggested he was not fully on board with GOP conspiracy theorizing. After 2020, Buck, like many of his Republican colleagues, voted to certify the election results, or rather, unlike many of his Republican colleagues, although several of them did, but the bulk of them did not. So Buck did certify the election results. He also objected to House Republicans removing Liz Cheney from leadership after she spoke out against Trump's election lies. It's interesting, too. He said then, too, that House Republicans were damaging themselves in national elections by embracing Trumpian conspiracy theories. More recently, Buck opposed the nonsense Biden impeachment inquiry. He's also said that he won't support Trump if he's convicted on any of his many indictments. Watch Buck below on CNN in the video here explain why he opposes the impeachment inquiry. Okay. I mean, we won't. But, well, how long will it take to do? We certainly won't. At 4 minutes, 9 seconds, we would find difficulty in that. But anyway, that's embedded herein, and you can take a look at it when we post our summary piece for the show. Even given these hints of moral fiber, though, Buck's abrupt decision to make himself the GOP face of principled democracy is something of a shock. In the past, he's hedged and vacillated, supporting some Republican efforts to overthrow the election while distancing himself from others. Now, though, he's giving interviews insisting that he won't vote for an election denier as House Speaker. Buck voted twice last week for Tom Emmer, who also accepted Biden's victory over Trump. It's weird, and it comes at a real cost. Buck's gotten credible death threats for refusing to vote for Jordan, who was endorsed by Trump. The landlord who owns the building where his Colorado office is located has said he's going to evict him. He may also face a credible primary challenge. So, why now? And why Ken Buck? It's hard to know exactly why Buck has suddenly embraced his inner anti-Trump. It's notable, though, that he's done so at more or less the same time as some of his colleagues. Moderates like Nebraska's Don Bacon managed to defeat Jordan's speaker bid. Arguably the first time the less rabid caucus managed to stand on principle and decisively thwart the radicals since Trump's election. Buck isn't a moderate by any reasonable definition, but the speaker crisis seems to have forced a lot of Republicans to take a stand they've been trying desperately to avoid. The House has been presented with a stark choice: become the dysfunctional outlet for 24/7 snake oil and fascism, or try to govern in a way that will attract the occasional vote from people who have not stapled their eyeballs to Newsmax. Buck isn't exactly an honorable man or a good legislator. That's not surprising. It's been some time since the GOP has been a party in which honorable people or good legislators are at all welcome. That means that opposition to Trump within the GOP has come from people who are compromised, unserious, downright evil, or some combination of all of those things. I guess that's what we have to work with. You might want to hold out for an ideal situation, but you could go to war with the lunatics you have, not the lunatics you might wish to have at some future date, I guess. Republicans have spent a lot of time constructing a party that encourages members to be their absolutely worst selves. Perhaps Ken Buck is a sign that that's changing, if only slightly. Might be premature to say so on one guy, but okay. He's a bizarre canary in the fascist coal mine, but at this point, that's the only type of canary the GOP has. So, chirp on, Ken. You're not the hero we want, you're not the hero we need, but you're the very marginally less horrible Republican we've got. Okay. So how do you like that? That's, I think, ample warning about Ken Buck, who's not running for speaker, but who is apparently influential in the conference decision-making about who should run and what they are going to do with it if they win. All right. Let's see. Other things to bring to your attention, and there are many, and they're scattered about, and we have to pick our way through them and see what, I've got two interesting, maybe courtroom developments, perhaps three. Let's start with this one, because this too might be of some interest to Joan when she comes around in the next segment, beginning at 10:30. But this entry in democracydocket.com by Mark Elias himself, writing this headline: "A dangerous legal theory returns for 2024," and it is illustrated with a sort of a Frankenstein graphic here. So we'll use the horror dramatic music for this one, complete with not only minor key, but thunder and lightning. Okay, a dangerous legal theory returns for 2024. Can you guess what they're resurrecting? Sure you can. If being a Republican politician means never having to accept the results of a free and fair election, then being a Republican lawyer means never having to abandon a fringe legal theory. This mindset has created a perpetual war on voting rights and democracy. It also explains the GOP's latest legal high-stakes gambit in Michigan. All right, well, pay attention. Rosalind McGregor, she probably already knows this story. You may recall that last summer, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected the fringe right-wing independent state legislature theory. That's the one we're worried about with the horror dramatic music. Right. The zombie back from the dead. In Moore versus Harper, North Carolina's Republican legislature argued that state courts were powerless to use the North Carolina Constitution as the basis to review and invalidate the enacted congressional redistricting map. As I wrote at the time, the crux of their argument was language in the U.S. Constitution that grants state legislatures the ability to set the time, place, and manner of congressional elections, subject only to an override by Congress. Now, I've argued before myself that this is actually a very limited clause and a limited grant of power to do nothing more than actually agree to the date and the kind of methodology that the states will use to choose their electors for the Electoral College, and, of course, to hold their congressional elections as well. But the time, place, and manner stuff is really about the nitty gritty details, but the top level details. When will our elections be? And how will we do our selecting? By popular vote? Yes? No? Okay. If so, whether to use drop boxes or mail-in ballots, that's lower level stuff that can and should properly be delegated to boards of election. When will the election be? What will it, and what will it entail? Okay, that's a decision for the state legislatures. But anyway, since state courts, and remember the argument, since language in the U.S. Constitution grants state legislatures the ability to set the time, place, and manner of congressional elections, subject only to an override by Congress, and since state courts are neither state legislatures nor Congress, the reasoning goes that they then remain powerless to review and strike down legislative enactments, including redistricting lines that involve federal elections. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court of the United States squarely rejected this claim and put to rest this dangerous novel legal theory, or so it seemed, and that's another cue for more dramatic music, I would guess. So it seemed. Recently, a group of Republican legislators in Michigan filed a new federal lawsuit seeking to resurrect ISL theory. Their targets are two pro-voting constitutional amendments that were added to the Michigan Constitution via voter-approved ballot measures in 2018 and 2022. Collectively, these two constitutional amendments expanded voting rights and democracy in the state. The 2018 amendment enshrined the right to vote on a secret ballot and expanded opportunities to register to vote and obtain and cast mail-in ballots. The 2022 amendment further protected mail-in voting while also expanding early voting. Together, they helped expand voting rights and ensure legal ballots are counted. By the way, I'll just note for the record as we go along here that the 2018 amendment predates COVID, which was the measures to mitigate the COVID pandemic's impact on voting are what led to most of the resurrection of the ISL theory. Or maybe even the formulation in the first instance of ISL theory. So it's interesting that they're using it to attack a constitutional amendment that arose and was adopted in Michigan prior to COVID entirely. Anyway, the lawsuit, which seeks to limit direct democracy and undermine free and fair elections, is a perfect storm of GOP anti-democracy ambitions. As I've said before, Mark Elias, that is, Republicans want to make it harder to vote and easier to cheat. The Republican legislators who brought the lawsuit claim to be injured by the pro-democracy provisions in the state constitution. Their complaint is reminiscent of when a Republican lawyer told the Supreme Court that invalidating a voter suppression law in Arizona puts us at a competitive disadvantage relative to Democrats. Politics is a zero-sum game. Limiting who can vote is at the core of the Republican Party's identity. The confident party of former President Ronald Reagan that boasted of popular mandates is now a shrunken, conspiracy-minded movement searching for ways to exercise majority power with a minority of voter support. Fortunately, the legal gambit to overturn the pro-voting constitutional amendments in Michigan is destined to fail. Last term, the Supreme Court rejected the fringe ISL theory in Moore. There is no reason to think that the court will want to take up the issue again so soon or on these facts. Further working against the GOP lawsuit is that it also directly contradicts an earlier Supreme Court case that specifically approved of ballot initiative processes as a means of adding election-related provisions to state constitutions. Reading the initial filings in this new Michigan case, I was left wondering why these plaintiffs are bringing this specific case. As noted, it advances a bogus legal theory that was recently rejected by the Supreme Court and runs directly against an earlier Supreme Court case as well. And even if the High Court were to agree, Democrats control the Michigan legislature and governorship and have already begun enacting these provisions into state law. So, One possibility is simply bad legal strategy. Republicans and their attorneys regularly make litigation decisions that defy common sense, and at least some of the attorneys in this case have a history of bringing meritless voting cases. More likely, however, is that the GOP plaintiffs and their attorneys want to lay a predicate now to contest the 2024 election. Just as former President Donald Trump and his allies did after the 2020 election, Republicans are planning on blaming the voting rules for why they lost. They will couple it with an attack on the courts and false claims of fraud. I suspect that their plan is for this case to remain pending and unresolved by Election Day 2024. That would allow them to use it as a cynical tool to claim election fraud and illegal voting rules robbed them of a fair outcome. It would give them a basis to contest the outcome of Michigan results once again in courts and in Congress. And when they fail, it will fuel their pathological election denialism. All this makes even more important that it be litigated aggressively now, which of course means Mark Elias gets paid, but you can put that aside. He's the only one doing this work. So this dangerous legal theory must be soundly rejected in court, and the case must be adjudicated quickly. The outcome of the litigation is not in serious doubt, but to protect democracy, this dangerous legal theory must again be defeated. Yeah, apparently defeating it once is not enough. Oh, you defeated it in Arizona? Well, we can use it in Michigan. All right, you defeated it in North Carolina? Well, we can use it in Michigan. All right, no, you're not allowed to use it in Michigan either. All right, fine. Well, we'll file in New Mexico. Why not? Sometimes that's what it takes to stomp these out. But that's an interesting revival of an interesting but stupid theory. It all comes down to an expansive misreading of these elections clauses. And once again, interesting that they say, well, if a rule for how to conduct an election is adopted by popular referendum, that is unconstitutional. You can't ask the people what they think and how they want to contest elections in their own state, because that's a power reserved to the state legislature, who are the representatives of those people. You need to ask the representatives of people, not the people themselves, because the people themselves will give you the wrong answer. It's the representatives of the people indirectly who really should be speaking to all of this, even though, quite honestly, the Republicans, or rather the Democratic state legislature could just adopt the same things and remove all doubt. But, it's, I guess, as Elias suggests here, you got to litigate this thing and bring it back and say, so the first time the Supreme Court said that popular referendum was a legitimate way of setting elections rules in the states, even though the popular referendum is not an action of the state legislature, even though you said that was okay before, will you now say again that it's still okay? Well, normally there's not a question about that, because courts used to be dependable in their application of the stare decisis model, right? You let the decision stand, let precedent stand. You do everything you can to avoid upsetting precedent while it still makes sense. And actually that's supposed to be used by these kinds of constitutional lawyers as a means to determine what isn't going to be a waste of their time and the court's time in bringing these cases. But they no longer, entertain that. It's billable hours and there's fame to be had, so we'll bring the case. And who knows? Maybe we'll eventually have enough Clarence Thomases that they'll just say, yeah, to hell with precedent. If it helps Republicans win, we'll allow them to do it. All right, let's see. Other courtroom developments, not directly tied to Trump's cases, but that has some implications here, I think. Let me take a look at this one here. Appeals court upholds broad use of obstruction law that prosecutors have deployed against Trump. So it does have bearing directly on Trump. Politico has this piece from the weekend, I think. Kyle Cheney and Josh Gerstein, whose names you hear quite often on the show. In a divided ruling, the court said there are numerous ways for the government to prove that January 6th defendants acted corruptly. This is like some hair-splitting stuff here. And a divided ruling on a panel of 3, you'll have that. But a 2-1 decision is just the same as a 3-0 decision. Anyway, federal prosecutors on Friday narrowly avoided an appeals court ruling, narrowly meaning by 1 vote. But there are only 3 votes to be had. So, it is narrow. It's as narrow as it gets, if there's any division at all, as narrow as it gets without losing the case. But federal prosecutors on Friday narrowly avoided an appeals court ruling that could have upended their criminal prosecutions of Donald Trump, but the legal battle will continue over a federal obstruction statute that has become a cornerstone of cases stemming from the storming of the Capitol on January 6th. A divided panel of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, in a long-awaited opinion, ruled that there are numerous ways for the government to prove the January 6th defendants acted, quote, corruptly when seeking to obstruct Congress's proceedings. The decision is a bullet dodged for special counsel Jack Smith because a D.C. Circuit ruling that narrowly construed the meaning of corruptly could have derailed Smith's prosecution of Trump on an obstruction charge. The judges ruled 2-1 that efforts by some January 6 defendants to sharply limit the conduct covered by the federal obstruction law were misguided. The ruling, which upheld a jury conviction for former Virginia police officer Thomas Robertson, concluded that efforts to install the losing presidential candidate could be enough to support an obstruction conviction. Yes, thank you. The opinion is likely to be appealed to the full bench of the D.C. Circuit or to the Supreme Court, but it nevertheless is an important milestone with repercussions for hundreds of January 6 prosecutions, including Trump's. The judges have labored for months to navigate the complexities of their federal obstruction of an official proceeding statute, a felony with a 20-year maximum sentence that was passed in the wake of the Enron scandal, which is, I believe, where Sidney Powell rose to prominence. Didn't she represent some of the Enron people? Anyway, prosecutors have routinely used the statute as the leading charge for those who breached the Capitol, intending to disrupt Congress's session to certify the 2020 election results. Defendants who have challenged the law say they were not acting corruptly because they believed Trump genuinely won the election and therefore they didn't intend a corrupt outcome. It's an argument, right? Complicating the issue is the murky nature of what it means to obstruct Congress. Is that really all that weird? All 3 judges on the case appeared to agree that lobbyists and peaceful protesters often attempt to influence the outcome of congressional policy debates, but should not be subject to 20-year felonies for constitutionally protected actions. Okay. Makes sense. The majority opinion Friday was written by D.C. Circuit Judge Florence Pan, who was appointed by President Joe Biden, and joined by Judge Cornelia Pillard, an appointee of President Barack Obama. They concluded that most forms of lobbying and peaceful protest wouldn't meet the corrupt requirements they laid out, but Judge Karen LaCraft Henderson, an appointee of President George H.W. Bush, dissented. But how so? Dissented by arguing that such actions might be swept into the definition that her colleagues adopted. Maybe. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world in some cases, but okay. Some judges have expressed concern that too broad a definition of corruptly could cover not only minor infractions at ordinary protests, but even lobbying or the stalling tactics that are a routine part of lawmaking at the Capitol. Ooh, filibuster? But precisely what conduct does meet that standard is fairly broad, the judges ruled. For example, the ruling Friday concludes that defendants who committed other felonies on January 6th can be convicted of the obstruction of Congress charge and subject to its 20-year maximum sentence without prosecutors proving that they knew specifics about that day's congressional proceedings. They didn't even know exactly what was going on in there. Special counsel Jack Smith has charged Trump with 3 conspiracies connected to his effort to subvert the 2020 election, including 1 to obstruct Congress's proceedings that day, the same charge faced by Robertson and more than 300 January 6th rioters. The majority opinion on Friday also held that interfering with or impeding the electoral vote certification on January 6th in a bid to get Trump declared the victor of the 2020 election would be enough to sustain a conviction for obstruction of Congress. That evidence was plainly sufficient to support a finding that Robertson intended to secure the unlawful benefit of installing the loser of the presidential election, Donald Trump, as its winner. Pan wrote, Robertson was one of the first January 6 defendants convicted by a jury of obstructing the proceedings that day. He carried a large stick with him on the Capitol grounds and made physical contact with an outnumbered platoon of riot police making their way to the building, video of which led the jury to convict Robertson of assaulting an officer while wielding a dangerous weapon. The judge sentenced him to 84 months in prison. Oops, we are behind on our music here, so we'll have to exit at a awkward moment. In dissent, Henderson said a conviction under the obstruction statute should only be allowed when a defendant is seeking to obtain a financial or professional benefit, or to improperly escape justice either for himself or another person. Although, yeah, it looks like Trump was improperly looking to escape justice that way, I would say myself. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're back a little bit late because of the late start of our music, but Joan McCarter is on the line and all lined up. But yeah, we're given this morning multitasking will be happening today because the House Republican Conference is having their meeting right now, I guess, to decide on which of the 957 candidates they have will be nominated as speaker on the floor so that 20-something of them can dissent from that and defeat them later. I mean, the aim is to try to get around that, but...
They just went through the first round of voting.
Oh, okay. So reports are coming out. Leaking, if you will.
Yes. Emmer got 78 votes. He got the most.
Okay. Well, there's 8 of them now.
And why would you vote present or others? Sessions got the least votes, so I'm assuming he drops.
Okay.
2 of them had already dropped.
Oh.
So they went into it this morning with just 7.
All right. Who else dropped? Do you know? I read the list earlier. Palmer. Okay. Alabama.
Yes.
All right.
So last night it was Muser from Pennsylvania.
Right.
He got a standing ovation for dropping. I think probably
so that's why
the only thing that could unify
You're not running? Yay!
Somebody dropping out of the race.
Yeah, he did. He briefly unified the conference by not running. So therefore he should have stayed in. Oh well. So Muser was out. No one knew who he was. So let's see. Oh, Sessions, interestingly, Sessions got the least votes on the first ballot.
Sessions got the least, which is kind of surprising. But
he is the longest serving.
He's sort of a has-been, I think.
Yeah. Well, he's also, they could point to him and say, didn't you lose a while ago? Like you lose your seat? Yeah, I did, but I came right back somewhere else. Yeah. Oh, all right.
So presumably he is out and they go on to the next round.
All right. I guess there's no rule that says they drop out one at a time. They could drop out more, but no one's required to drop out. It's just are you capable of embarrassment question?
Right. It's just the lowest vote total leaves.
Okay. Oh, is that agreed upon? They set that as the rules? Okay.
But apparently they were also going to be doing it by voice vote, by roll call vote.
Oh.
So people can't do this.
So no secret ballot.
No secret ballot.
That's fine. It's good practice for, what's his name from Nebraska, who didn't understand how the speaker voting was done. He's the guy who was very proud of himself for introducing this brand new, awesome idea he had for how the Republicans could unify. They would have an election ahead of time inside the conference, and then when they decided on a nominee, everybody would have to vote for that nominee, which is a new thing that they haven't tried anywhere except for every one of them who have ever run for Congress and run in a primary before. So this was his big idea, but it also was a pledge that everybody would sign to vote yay for Speaker on the House floor. Everybody, once we've decided who our nominee is, they must pledge to vote yay. And I'm like, all right, buddy, you know that when you vote on the House floor, it's not a yay or nay vote, right? You do know that. I mean, I don't know if you know that, or you are secretly trying to elect Kanye West as Speaker of the House, which might be something they want to do. But yeah, that was, he had written it down, and this was the pledge. Everyone must vote yay. And it was like, well, I forget what his name is already, but maybe this is why they did it. A reminder, this is how you vote for Speaker. You stand up and call out the name of the person, not yay, nay. And really, honestly, you've done this 20 times this year, guy. You should have remembered that. So, okay, they'll be practicing. They're shouting out names. Sessions got the least. You can't
expect a member of Congress to know how voting works.
Very rarely is that actually the case, you know? I mean,
you're asking for a lot there.
That's tough. So, okay, well, they got past his problem, I guess, and now they'll be practicing this. Sessions got the least. Emmer got the most, but only 78, but it's divided among seven of them now, and there were some presents.
9 because they also had present or voting for somebody else.
Well, Mr. President is out.
Know, and 6 of them did vote either present or for somebody else.
Okay, 6 did that, and how many for Sessions does it say?
He got 8.
8. All right.
Emmer got 78. Johnson got the next highest total, 34.
Interesting. Okay.
Donalds and Hearn both got 27.
Tie.
Scott got 18.
Mm-hmm.
Bergman got 16.
All right. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot to divide. 78 is pretty substantial, so
it's there's
only 8
Emmer Johnson, sort of, I think.
78 and 30 something for Johnson? Or 40?
34.
34. All right.
For Johnson.
So there's a couple of votes to pick up. Like, all right, eliminating, it makes sense to eliminate the last person, but that only leaves 8 votes up for grabs, and they may all go to present, for all we know.
Donalds is, the MAGA choice, and he's picked up a lot of endorsements.
Okay.
Donalds is concerning, but we'll see what happens. I mean, Jordan couldn't do it, so you wouldn't think Donalds could do it unless they just get so sick of this. It happens.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it is about Donalds that I think, in January, there were some votes for him in the McCarthy voting. And I don't really know what was driving that, like what made him so interesting, or even who it was that voted for him. I've forgotten, but it's weird. It's unusual. I wasn't expecting it, but
he's been in the House for 3 years now.
Yeah, barely. Right. This is his second term.
Although he was a state legislator.
Well, okay.
I believe. Sure. So, he's not a complete political novice.
Okay.
He's a Florida man.
Yeah. Oh, that helps.
He is a Trumper.
All right.
He's very MAGA.
Has he got a sports background? All the rest of them have sports background.
He might have a sports background. He's, their black friend.
Yeah, I think that has something to do with it. They don't have a lot to choose from, and I think they also, there were definitely some of them who are like, ooh, I can't be, if they attack me for voting for that guy, I'll be like, you're a racist.
Yeah.
Not me, you. Oh, okay. I'm just sort of curious about whether he has a sports background, only because all the rest of them who do have brought it to the fore. There's the one who was the football player for Alabama. They got rid of the wrestler guy. One of them's a hockey player, apparently, at some point. And it's been, I don't know, for some reason they want to feature that prominently in their bio, but I don't know. And you're right, he's not a complete novice. So he was in the state legislature. He has got some political experience. Other than that, member of the Tea Party movement. Not that that's real political experience. It's protest experience.
Yes.
But, there's that. And but he was in the Florida House for 4 years. He moves quickly.
Mm-hmm. Who's what, 41, I think I saw?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So, okay. So he's not in second, but he's tied for about third or something?
Tied for third, yeah.
All right. And it sounded like he had 27 votes. The second guy had 34. So
34, yes, Johnson.
7 votes behind him, and there are 8 Sessions votes to be had. So just go grab all those Sessions. Actually, just go steal all of his lawn signs.
signs.
Yeah, and then that counts as votes. And then you'll be in second place.
The really terrible thing is they ran out of coffee.
Oh, like Airplane. Well, that should cause that. Oh my God, another Republican riot. Were they all right?
I don't know yet. I haven't seen a coffee update.
Okay. Well, that's what comes out of there. There were 9 votes for more coffee, and Sessions lost to running out of coffee. All right. Well, that's exciting. And do they keep going until they, or
they keep going until there's only one standing?
Really?
Which could take a while.
I mean, that one standing could just be 78 for Emmer, and everybody else votes for themselves. That's technically, is that still a good outcome, or I don't really know how this works.
They want to come out of this with somebody having 217 votes.
Yeah. Well,
I don't think that they're going to be able to come out of this today with somebody having 217 votes.
I mean,
maybe,
the rules, I guess, it sounds like the rule, if there is one, will let them out without getting it. It's just they'll get down to a point where they say, all right, one guy got, if one person gets 199 votes and another person gets 35, that 35 person is out. Do they then hold another round with just that guy, the one who won, and see if they get to 217, or is it enough that they...
This is what I don't know.
Yeah, we got to wait and see.
Yeah.
Okay. Coffee won. That's amazing. They should just nominate coffee. All right. Well, we don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. We're unified. This is great.
They are all very happy that what's his name from Pennsylvania is gone. They can agree on that.
Yes. So you stand up and clap, and I guess maybe they'll clap for everybody who obeys the rule from here on in and drops out. Will Sessions be recognized to speak on his way out, or they just kick him out?
I think they let him stay in the room. I mean, he has to keep helping him vote. So,
right.
They can't kick people off the island.
Yeah, all right. He's still in there, and they can. I mean, I imagine if they give him a chance to say, "Okay, well, the party has spoken, and I'm out, and I'll be supporting." Maybe he throws his 8 votes to somebody, or maybe they just don't care.
That could be happening. It's all happening behind closed doors, so we don't know for sure.
We have to wait for people to tweet out.
Whoever is standing by the door, who's whispering out to what's his face, Jake Sherman, about what just happened.
Right. What if it's George Santos and those numbers are completely bogus?
That could very well be.
The baby got 11 votes. So we don't know. I guess there's no real incentive except screwing with the press, which sometimes works for Republicans, to tell lies about it. But it certainly came out the way I would guess people probably would have predicted, with Emmer in the lead.
Yes.
And then after that, well.
Yeah. Emmer.
Could be anything.
He has a serious problem in that Trump doesn't like him.
Well.
Trump really doesn't like him.
Okay. Is he tweeting or
he's retweeting, retruthing,
Oh, right. Laura Loomer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that the story? Laura Loomer attacked him. He didn't have much to say about Emmer himself, apparently, and then Loomer said something, and so he just whatevered.
He's supposedly privately been complaining about Emmer to people.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We'll see where it goes. He's got all day to sabotage him.
Yeah.
So that's good.
The problem is Emmer and Johnson are probably the two who have the best grasp on how stuff is supposed to work.
Okay.
I mean, Emmer is whip.
Sessions
the guy
should
who's
have,
supposed to be counting the votes. He doesn't have a great track record so far this session.
Yeah, I mean, these are people are just notoriously difficult to deal with and read because they'll lie to you.
Yeah,
but people lie to the whip.
Yes,
they do
and
that.
they will, do something unthinkable like vote against the motion to proceed to the defense appropriations bill.
Yeah, all right.
Nobody in a normal world sees that coming.
Yes.
So, how much you can blame it on Emmer not being able to do the job of counting versus people lying to him. I think you're probably right. It was mostly people lying to him.
It sounds difficult.
And McCarthy also just thinking, well, we'll just force it anyway.
Yeah.
We'll just go to the floor anyway. I don't care how embarrassed I am by this.
Oh. Yeah, he probably thought people would change their minds.
But McCarthy doesn't care about being embarrassed.
Well, there would be a little point because it's going to happen. Well, it's inevitability. Nothing I can do about it.
Don't discount the possibility, I don't think it'll happen, that McCarthy is out there thinking he can be the last one standing. It's not going to happen. Those 8 people who voted to oust him are not going to come back around and say, okay, everything else is totally fallen apart. Let's have Kevin again.
Yeah, I mean, that's no good for them. They'll be killed.
But I would not be surprised if Kevin isn't thinking that.
Okay. Well, he's misunderstood riots in the House before. So I guess this one too. I also was noting, as I'm scrolling down through your writings on this stuff in yesterday's piece about it, and just noticing Elise Stefanik there again, and just taking note of having gone down the list of the candidates and noting that McCarthy, who was the top leader of Republicans, of course, ejected, but then they went to, well, what about the number 2 guy in the House? No, he's out too. What about eventually, then they did Jordan, who's number nothing. And then now Emmer, the number 3 House Republican, sits atop the list. But I also noticed that number 5 on the list, the NRCC chair, was running. But then noticed, hey, where's number 4? And that's Elise Stefanik. And I just thought it was interesting to note that, all right, Republicans, what are we going to do for leadership? Well, here's another list of 9 other guys, white guys, who will be running for leadership. And look at this. We tried the number 1, 2, 3, and 5 Republicans. We're out of options.
8 white guys and 1 black guy.
Oh, yes, right. I forgot about
but yes,
Mr. Donalds. But
yes, the guy is the notable part of this.
Yeah. And not that I want at least Stefanik to stand for this election, but I'm also wondering whether if she secretly thinks all the men will destroy themselves and then she'll scoop up the votes, or is she just like, they don't do the woman thing in this party, or is she just
a combination
crazy?
Of the above.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I don't know how many friends Stefanik has made.
Yeah, rarely.
She's not a particularly trustworthy person, judging by her public.
Yeah, but she was such a schemer and a riser. But she may have rocketed past.
There is definitely a glass ceiling in the GOP conference.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I'm just sort of watching, and of course, Greg has been noting that one after every time they nominate somebody, Stefanik gets up and says, "This is the guy. This is the one we have to be behind." And he's the ultimate. Okay, he lost. All right, then this guy, this next guy, he's the guy. But I mean, is it just because has the job of? Has she nominated everybody who's been up so far, or just? I mean, there's only been 2, I guess, who had to be nominated. But is that her job, or is she just that flexible about who's awesome? Or
I think she's that flexible about who's awesome.
Okay. So we'll see.
It is sort of surprising that she's not running herself. She was speculated to be.
She was said to be that ambitious.
Glass ceiling.
Sure. Could be anything. And
plotting behind the scenes to stab everybody else in the back and swoop in.
I'm curious about what she's doing. Maybe somebody will leak from the conference who she voted for in this contest. I assume she'd be an Emmer person at the moment.
I would think so. Yeah.
And all right, well,
I think she'll be voting with the majority most of the way through.
Yeah. All right. So will they proceed directly to another round, or will they break for lunch?
They're in the second round now.
Okay.
They did the nominating speeches. I don't think that they were going to repeat doing nominating speeches.
What I said before still stands. All right. So now the interesting thing will be to see, does Emmer get more or does he get less? Or
does he just stay there?
Yeah.
At 78.
That's entirely possible. There's other people who will be trading votes. There's only 8 to be had.
I would very much like to know who the 6 who voted either present or or somebody else were.
Yeah, it's too bad we can't see that, but they're entitled to close the doors on this conference meeting. It's
as ugly as it's going to get, I assume, probably good.
Yeah,
probably good that the doors are closed.
It'll be very exciting.
Of the horrors.
Yeah,
and heard enough of the death threats and the phone calls and.
Yeah, well, we've heard a lot about that, and that may be his biggest feature right now. Emmer, I didn't threaten any of you.
Right.
So, me for speaker. And then he'll stay at 78, and then he'll say, I guess I should have threatened you. Now, all right, fine, I will threaten some of you. Oh, look, now I went to 89. But, all right, well, we'll just sit here and wait. And I guess if they've pledged to go all day and maybe longer, they might. This is a lot of people to have to eliminate. But what time did their meeting start?
They started at, I think, 9:45, I believe.
Right. So they're in round 2, an hour into it. That's pretty fast moving. They could get down to 1 just in a day. I mean, it means spending all day behind closed doors and doing nothing, but it's not unusual for a Tuesday. So we may actually have a conclusion of some kind, unless somehow, I mean, I don't know what their rules are about other people jumping in. Like we went down to 7, but can 2 people join later on? I don't know. No. Okay, it's locked. Okay,
it's locked for now.
But maybe when they get to the stage where if we can't get 217 for whoever comes out on top, we open it again. Who knows? All right. So have they said anything about what their plans are for having a floor vote? Would that mean do they aim to have one tomorrow or this week at all?
Oh, I don't know if they've looked that far ahead.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't if I were them. I suppose it's only fair to say, there's a pretty good chance we're not going to resolve things right away. We haven't before. So, okay. So that's all you do. And for the moment is watching that.
But
I know you're interested in other things.
Daily Coast, if you want to watch. Oh, Bergman is out on the second ballot.
Oh, okay.
I got very Al Haig vibes.
Yeah. Well,
from Bergman.
I see what you mean. Yeah, he's the Marine general, right?
Right.
And
who after Scalise, I think, was out, stepped up and said, "I'll do it."
Yeah, I'm in charge here at the White House. Okay.
And then when
I mean, it was nice of him to do, considering what happens to you.
Lost his first round. Bergman stands up. I'll do it.
Okay, good. And then Bergman loses his round. Okay. No, you won't, is the answer. Okay. That's interesting. I thought he might go further. I mean, Republicans are impressed by generals.
No, they're not.
Not now. They're not. Tommy Tuberville instructed them. Why are you interested in supporting armed forces brass? They're garbage. Block them. Okay. So they did. So now he's blocked too. I thought he made a good, which is why he was out, I guess. I thought he made a decent candidate in that he was selling himself as a temporary solution. I'm a general. I know how to do this.
I can do this until we figure something else out, basically.
Right. And I'm 76, so I can't last that long as it is. So I think he was kind of like elder statesman / military leader. I'll do it until we come up with someone terrible enough to elect. Okay. But no, he's out.
Yep.
That's very quick. So they're going to do this in rapid succession.
Yeah.
That's good. And, we can't stay on until they're done. That's too bad. But you'll get tired of that pretty quickly, I think, if you have to keep an eye on all of the messaging as well. But, all right. Well, once they've elected, is there anything else on your radar? I know it'll be difficult to talk about anything else while you're watching what's happening.
Yeah.
But I don't know. If there are any flags you need to raise.
I don't think there's anything big on the Supreme Court docket this week, I hope.
I hope not. Although, as we were entering the segment, I was reading that a Michigan lawsuit now seeks to revive the independent state legislature theory.
Oh, great.
So that sounds like fun. They're going to try and make their way back to the court with that. It doesn't sound like it will work. I was reading Mark Elias about it, but he was mostly advocating for let's squash this quickly and not let it make its way into the appeals courts again. But I guess they're looking to invalidate two Michigan state constitutional amendments adopted by statewide referendum. And as the theory goes this time, well, the voters, asking the voters directly, the voters aren't a state legislature, so they can't set voting rules even by statewide referendum. It has to be adopted by the state legislature, which, no, but...
Yeah, it kind of depends on the state constitution, does it not?
It might, certainly. I mean, provided that they accept statewide referenda, then there shouldn't be a problem. But apparently there was a prior Supreme Court ruling that says, no, you can set statewide election rules that way. We've addressed this in the past and said yes, but Clarence Thomas
I don't
is
know
still
that
there.
I see them going there again. I just sent you a link on a Bloomberg Law story that I found very interesting on what they are probably doing this time around. It's a great headline.
It is. Yikes. What?
Yes. Sawing off the executive branch. There are a lot of cases that will potentially take a lot of power away from the executive.
Well, they have a lot. I suppose if you're looking for some, and you want to
do,
steal it from somewhere.
Looking toward a very originalist kind of idea, if you're going to be one of those people that Congress passes the laws and Congress has to say exactly how those laws are going to be promulgated.
No more.
So taking the executive level of making regulations and deciding how the law was written as they write those regulations, giving the executive branch deference for determining how to implement a law. All of that could be out the door.
Yeah, to hell with the last 100 years
Pretty
of understanding
much.
how things work.
Pretty much.
Okay. Yeah, I see mention of Chevron deference. That's the standard they're discussing.
At least two cases taking on Chevron.
That's not deference to Chevron CEO Mike Wirth and his workout schedule, but rather something entirely different.
Yes.
So we started the show with Chevron deference about getting up at 3:45 a.m. for instantaneous 90-minute workouts, and end with the real Chevron deference. Okay, it's all about Chevron today. All right. Well, we appreciate your taking a look and keeping an eye on proceedings behind closed doors, and we appreciate the people leaking from inside closed doors about what's happening. I mean,
yeah, I really don't like not being able to see it happen.
But this is, I guess, I'm glad that there's at least some reporting on the results, and we'll get some understanding of the dynamics of this clown conference. Sorry. The improper word usage in that phrase was caucus, not clown. We were right about that part. We may have an answer within an hour or two about at least who's left and whether or not they're going to insist on 217 votes. And if you want the answer, follow what Joan's posting in the live blogging on the front page at Daily Kos. And you got an insider view of that posting and the process by which it's being handled right here on Kagro in the Morning. Thanks for coming by, Joan, and multitasking.
You are most welcome. I was glad to be here.
All right. And now you can go and watch the live blogging and say, I got a view behind the curtain earlier today.
And maybe next Tuesday we can devote the entire half hour to the government shutdown again.
Oh, excellent. Right. That time is coming. It's almost November again. Well, what's it, the 24th right now? So, yeah, I guess we'll be right on the cusp of November. Very good.
Halloween.
Okay.
We'll be talking on Halloween.
Ooh, spooky. Government shutdowns are very scary, so it'll be excellent. I predict a trick that day. No treats.
Yes, no treats.
All right, we'll see you then.
Networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, Halloween ought to be all about process. You do ask people trick or treat, and so rarely do you get the trick that nobody even knows what that's all about anymore. We should read Wikipedia and then all invoke the trick option as the kids come around next Tuesday. All right, time now, though, for a real treat. Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next.